evening. Here are some women stars, women heroes from our armed forces. Sergeant Vice Admiral Punita Arora. She was actually the first woman to be both a Lieutenant General in the Indian Army and a Vice Admiral in the Navy. She was from the Medical Corps, so her role actually involved treating injured soldiers anywhere, be it in field areas or in tough territories. The next one, Flight Lieutenant Mohana, was the first woman fighter pilot to fly the Hawk jet. Yes, as you know, in the Indian Air Force now, our women officers are flying fighter jets. Officer Mitali Madhumita was the first woman to receive the Sena Medal for Gallantry, an award given to soldiers showing exemplary courage, and to her it was given for being part of operations in Jammu and Kashmir and Northeast. Captain Divya Ajit Kumar, the first woman to get the coveted Sword of Honor. Captain Tanya Shergill, this year became the first woman to lead an all-male corps of the Signals contingent this Republic Day. There are just a handful of examples, viewers, that I have collated to tell you that women in our armed forces are making us proud and achieving new glory every single day. Which is why today the Supreme Court gave a landmark, historic verdict, patted for women in the forces, and said that yes, women officers should be given permanent commission in the army. Not just that women officers should actually be given commanding roles in the army, in the verticals where they currently serve. This verdict comes, and if you remember, Miranau did a debate about the centre's stand, the government stand, because about 10 days ago we told you that the centre was against this move. They said that the women's physiological features don't really put them on par with the men and are a challenge for them to be in many of these commanding roles. The centre even said that most soldiers in the Indian Army come from rural backgrounds, and so they will not listen to a woman in a commanding position, which is why we can't give them those roles. The Supreme Court has rejected all of these very old age mindset, ladki hai mindset, archaic arguments. Supreme Court says it was an insult to women to question their ability and their achievements in the army. Now this part is done, and I'm sure most agree that this was a great move. I want to talk about what next. I want to talk about the fact that all of this is still only limited to women army officers in specific parts of the army. In medical, in intelligence, in engineers, in signals, in army aviation. Here women are allowed, but not in hardcore combat posts, combat roles. Not in the infantry or the mechanized infantry, not in the armored corps. So the question that I am asking tonight, and the view that I am batting for tonight, isn't it time for us to allow women at every single point, in every single role, where there are men fighting and protecting our country? Wing Commander Anu Acharya joins us this evening, Captain Amrit Kaur, Aishwarya Bhati, Senior Advocate with the Supreme Court, General Shankar Roy Chaudhary, and Major General P.K. Sehgal. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. And General Chaudhary, let me begin with you. Do you think it's time for women in combat roles in the army?
No. That's my brief answer. Combat roles in the army has got to be very carefully thought through before we think of putting women into combat units, the ones that you mentioned, the infantry, the artillery, and the armored corps, which engage in close combat with the enemy. There are several reasons for it. It's not death. It is not injury. It is the possibility of being taken a prisoner and being mistreated by a savage jihadi enemy who has not heard of the Geneva Conventions and delights in torturing his captives, if any are unfortunate to fall enough to fall into his hands. Keeping the type of adversity we are facing in Jammu and Kashmir and elsewhere, I personally feel that we should not put women into the combat arms of the forces where the main enemy is Pakistan-sponsored jihadis who do not obey the Geneva Convention or any other convention. They disregard the Geneva Conventions and are known to torture their prisoners very severely. That is my reason for mentioning that women should not be commissioned into the combat arms where the possibility exists of their falling into the hands of a jihadi enemy.
If I may ask you, but isn't that something that already happens with the male soldiers? We've seen the worst of the examples, the worst of the brutality, sometimes they've been mutilated. If the rules, there are no rules often depending on who your enemy is. Isn't it the same for men as well?
It is absolutely the same for the men. I would prefer it didn't happen to our women.
Okay. I respect your view. Let me take it across to Captain Amrit Kaur and ask her this question. Captain Kaur, do you believe it's time for women in combat roles?
Absolutely. I do not have a percent of doubt, an iota of doubt in my mind as to why women should not be in combat role. When there can be a Mahila battalion in CRPF, when there can be an Assam Rifles, paramilitary battalion that can be created, what's wrong if we have a women cadre or a PBOR cadre or officers in the combatant role too? I do respect as to what Sir just now said as to what happens to men. He would not like women to, suffer the same. I respect your view, sir. But the fact of the matter is when a woman shall enter into this territory and, she would want to opt for something like this, I am sure she will be mentally prepared. She would know what lies ahead. So why deny her that right? Just because you feel it is not right.
I actually want to go across to Wing Commander Anuma Acharya as well.
I don't feel it is not right.
Before I ask General Chaudhary to respond, because I'm sure Wing Commander Acharya would also have something to say on, on similar lines. Wing Commander?
All I have to say is the Indian Air Force has started women in the fighter roles. And now Avani Chaturvedi, Bhavna and the other officer, so they are already there in the fighter role, which is a combat. Secondly, in the Indian Navy, if you know, this Tarini, the airboat, the boat, it was a vessel which was taken around the world, and there were only women officers. So if we talk about physical strength, it was a 55 feet heighted boat, and they went around the globe. So I suppose that already Indian Air Force has done it. Indian Navy is a kind of, they can do it. And regarding Indian Army, I am absolutely with Captain Amrit Kaur, what she says.
I just want to point this out as well, that the squadron leader Minty Agarwal was one of those who was recently awarded the Yudh Seva medal. She was the person who was guiding Wing Commander Abhinandan in that operation, and I have absolutely no doubts that if it was her in place of Captain Wing Commander Abhinandan, she would have also shown the same kind of bravery in the hands of enemy as Wing Commander Abhinandan did. And she did her own version, but the point being that we don't have to limit their roles. General Chaudhary, you may want to respond to the two women who raised their points.
Yes, two small points. Neither the Air Force nor the Navy fight on ground. It's a totally different environment. The Navy fights on the seas. They live in a ship. The Air Force fights in the air, and they live on an air base. So the environment of living and fighting is totally different. So that is one. But I'm not doubting the bravery of our women. My God, can I tell you a small story? Will you give me a minute?
Yes, please.
Well, my story is that of the regimental medical officer of a Gurkha battalion who happened to be a woman. And this was the battalion under my direct charge. And this battalion, a very famous battalion, was being inducted into a very hot sector in Jammu and Kashmir. I happened to be a senior commander there, and I instructed the commanding officer of the battalion to leave his RMO behind when the battalion moved into that sector, which was a very hot sector, and they were fighting these jihadis. But this young lady, she was very young at that time, she formed up in front of me. I was a 3-star general. He said, "Sir, this is my unit. I will not, why are you taking me away from my unit?" So I didn't explain anything to her. I saw her tremendous spirit, and she went into action with her battalion on ground, and I'm very happy to say that she was decorated for gallantry. So I'm not doubting at all the capabilities of our women. I just do not want our women mistreated as I have seen the men being mistreated when you're fighting a savage enemy who's got no scruples, obeys no laws except the law of jihad.
General Sehgal, do you agree with that view?
I totally agree with General Chaudhary's views. We have a
you
large
talking to me?
population, menfolk are in plenty. We are not Americans, we are not Israelis, we are not French or
Yes, General Sehgal.
I said I am in total agreement with General Chaudhary's views. I am in total agreement with General Chaudhary's views. Our environment is totally different. Our enemy is an enemy which is not only devoid of any ethics or morality at all. He is the most brutal and most ruthless enemy that the world has ever seen. Under the circumstances, I don't think we need to unnecessarily subject our women to that sort of a torture should they ever get captured by the enemy. We've got plenty and plenty of menfolk, and under the circumstances, better if the women are not in the combat role. Their bravery is absolutely without a question. They have absolutely top of the line spirits. They have displayed their courage both in peace as well as in war. But under the circumstances, I still feel it's still some time for us to get women in the combat role, particularly in the army. Air Force and Navy, as General Chaudhary said, is an entirely different environment. It's only a very unfortunate case where a woman gets shot over Pakistan and gets captured. But she is not in direct combat with the enemy on the ground. Being in combat on the ground is totally different from being at sea or being in the air. There are other armies in the world which, because of shortage of manpower like Israel, women are in combat role.
But General, shouldn't that be a decision that women
I don't think there is going to any
can take? Why is it that the men are deciding whether the women should be exposed to that kind of danger or not? With all due respect, I'm just putting it out there. Let the women decide.
Because unfortunately, women haven't had that experience. We have had the experience of dealing with this enemy. We've seen the brutality is done. I would like to go on record to say that Pakistani jihadis have sodomized the dead bodies of Indian troops.
Yes.
Would you want this to happen to your women? When we've known what is the type of devil that he is, I don't think I would like to expose my sister or my mother or my wife, etc., to this sort of a brutality.
I wouldn't want this to happen to anybody,
willing to expose themselves,
General Sehgal,
the
not
choice
even
is
to
theirs.
our men. It shouldn't happen to anybody, but the opportunity to serve your country at every single level, perhaps I believe, should be given to every citizen of this country, male or female. Aishwarya Bhati is with me. If I can just, General, for 2 minutes go across to her, because Aishwarya Bhati fought the case, in the Supreme Court, the one for which we got the verdict, and Supreme Court had some very interesting things to say tonight, Aishwarya, to the government about gender justice and evolution of women even within the armed forces.
Yes, Tanvi, you're absolutely right. It is a watershed judgment that we have got, and not just for women in the armed forces, but for women across the world. Because what we were fighting today were really stereotypes and the mindset. It was not really, a battle for women and their place. In the world, it was a battle for their place, their dignity, their equality. And while I respect the views of the two senior generals here, I think they have great experience for anybody to discount their views. But I would still respectfully disagree. I think, in a zealousness to try and protect our women, I think we can't be taking away the liberties and, the freedoms that are available. No soldier, when women walk into male bastions, they don't choose to, ask for lower standards. Journalism is one, litigation is one, armed forces is one. And in armed forces also, women have been there now for 27, 28 years. For all along, we have had exemplary women who have performed in the, displayed courage under fire. Colonel Mithali Madhumita's case is one such case which we cited before the Supreme Court. An education corps officer who in the face of a jihadi attack, a Fidaiyin attack at the Indian embassy in Kabul, was single-handedly responsible for saving over 19 lives. So and gender cannot be a disqualification. It has to be individual merit, individual suitability, and organizational requirement. And that is exactly what has been affirmed by the Supreme Court today, because this discrimination that was being brought in, see, permanent commission was brought in as a policy even by the government last year, but they were still discriminating qua the women who were serving in the forces and had completed more than 14 years, and discrimination to confine them to staff appointments only as a gender. That is a discrimination that was on completely fallacious grounds, and it was in the face of their demonstrated conduct and experience and statistics for 28 years. So it has been rightly, completely demolished by the Supreme Court in very powerful words.
And in many ways, Wing Commander Acharya, I believe that women perhaps have a better fighting spirit because they don't face this only when they enter the armed forces. They literally have to face a battle and fight a battle at every single stage, from school to sometimes domestic issues to getting into the forces, and at every single stage, and not just the army or the navy or the air force, but even in private sector, it's the same battle. We perhaps just get more adept at fighting these battles. Mentally, we must be a lot more stronger, I'm sure.
Biologically
Absolutely.
and mentally,
Women
are
are
stronger
more
than
stronger, and the thing is that they have to face.
General Sehgal, I'll come to you in just a bit. Yes, Wing Commander Acharya.
Sir, with due regards to General Chaudhary and General Sehgal, I just have to mention that when this entry of women started in the armed forces, it was a letter of November, I suppose it was 91, and it started on an experiment basis. So instead of denying that women cannot enter into combat roles, why can't we start on an experiment basis for 5 years? Let them prove.
General Sehgal, would you want to respond to that first, and then I'll go across to General Chaudhary as well, but because you were also making a point. General P.K. Sehgal, please.
I'm sure the Honorable Supreme Court heard all these views and gave a decision that women should be brought into the armed forces in every single arm other than the combat arms. The Supreme Court heard your views and thereafter disagreed. They gave a very historic judgment that the women cannot and must not be denied permanent commission, and they also must not be denied commanding positions, but in arms other than the combat arms. And they specifically said not in infantry, not in armored corps, not in mechanized infantry, and not in artillery. There has to be a reason behind this. Experimentation, slowly and slowly, let the process evolve itself. After 4, 5, 10 years, this can be reviewed. No decision is permanent. Things undergo a change. Army is a very vibrant organization. Any organization which resists change is indicative of decay and decadence. And I can assure the nation, Indian Army is the last army in the world which is indicative of decay and decadence. We are a forward-looking army, and we always want to experiment. The very fact that we've got women go on to fighter role and now go on to combat role, and the fact that women have initially were confined to permanent commission only in logistics, in education and in law. But now we've said in all arms other than the combat arms. So it's a step forward. And over a period of time, I'm very certain that we will possibly also evolve into this, where we are wanting the women wanting from day one. The very fact that the Supreme Court did not agree with their viewpoint, there's a logic behind it. I'm sure the Supreme Court understood what they were talking about. They heard their views, they heard the Army's views, and they gave a judgment basically against the Ministry of Defense
So
in
if
favor
I
of
may
the women.
just,
And I appreciate that because I very strongly feel that
yes, you are saying the time will come, maybe not now, maybe in 5-10 years, the army is
I
also
very strongly-
evolving. Yes. Yes, but if just for a minute, if I may just go across to Aishwarya Bhati and ask her this question. Aishwarya, was this deliberated and debated in the courtrooms
Yes.
as well, the combat role part?
No, it was not. That is what exactly I wanted to say, that this was not even an issue before the Supreme Court, and this is because it was not raised as an issue before the Supreme Court, therefore there is no judgment or consideration or determination of this issue, sir. I welcome your thoughts that, Indian Army is progressive. In fact, we all admire and adore and respect the Indian Army. It is amongst the most respected armies of the world. But unfortunately, when it comes to gender issues, the more things change, the more they remain the same. The kind of arguments that were thrown up on behalf of the army were completely regressive and like remains of a relic. That is the exact arguments that were being made. So that is what has been upset by the Supreme Court. And combat roles, yes, never say never, sir. It is a evolutionary process. The role of combat itself is changing. We are not going to see the future combat is not going to be about hand-to-hand combat. We are going to see more and more roles of these the missiles, the drones. Minty Agarwal, Squad Leader Minty Agarwal, you were right in saying, she was the flight controller. So with the changing face of the combat itself, the last of the fighter pilots has already been born. So it's going to be like completely different from how it has been fought in the past. And with that change, women have certainly a very, very big role to play. And it cannot, you can't shut them out as a class, as a gender, you can't shut them out. They will come there, they will prove themselves, they have proven themselves. You know, somewhere a journey of a woman in these male bastions is not her journey alone. It becomes the journey of every woman that is going to walk on that path. Because you never hear that, men are incompetent. You will hear a particular male officer is incompetent. But when a woman's competence is in question, it is not about that individual woman to be incompetent. It's about women as a class are incompetent. So those are the stereotypes that we are fighting and slowly succeeding against.
Yes, and congratulations for the victory that you got tonight, and also thank you for clarifying on that part, because we've also been explaining this to our viewers through the day as well. The case itself for now was not about combat roles. That part hasn't even started yet. General Chaudhary, would you want to respond to what Wing Commander was saying earlier? Wing Commander Acharya says, why not experiment? Let's begin with 5 years and see where it goes.
I reserve my judgment on that for factors which I've already brought out. But the fact is that our women are brave. They are very brave when they have to be. Our women officers are very intelligent, very brave. They're very high quality. But I do feel that direct combat, and incidentally, there was a lot of discussion that the warfare of the future is going to change. It may change. There are indications are it's not going to change. We are going to relapse into jihadi warfare. More and more, that is the one that is coming forward. So fighting is always going to be a dirty business. Casualties, atrocities, what's going on now? So while that is correct, you've got drones and everything coming in. I agree with you fully. Warfare is changing, but it is also changing in many ways. It's going backwards, in a manner of speaking. and the version that is going backward appears to be gaining more importance. So those are different issues. We'll not discuss those now. Those are not the subject of this evening's discussion. But frankly speaking, I would want I would want the women officers not to be exposed to these hazards and atrocities which are widespread in the type of enemy we are fighting.
But okay,
And
if I
also,
may, yes.
Yes, I think the point was made.
Yes, go ahead, please.
No, the point was made that the court itself did not discuss. No, the point was, I was trying to make, give me a minute. Even Subash Chandra Bose, the Rani of Jhansi Brigade, Subash Chandra Bose, Rani of Jhansi Brigade, you must have heard about it. Even Subash Chandra Bose himself in the Indian National Army, in the Azad Hind Fauj, he did not put the Rani of Jhansi Brigade in direct battlefield role. Just a historical aside.
Yes, but General Chaudhary, that was pre-independence. We are looking at 2020. Women are there in all fields, all possible fields. You're talking about a time when women barely got to get out of their parda and get out of their homes. You know, it's a different battle. I understand you're being protective about the women soldiers.
I think you're
Rani of
mistaken.
Jhansi fought the war.
Yes. Even then he should have allowed.
Rani of Jhansi, I'm not talking of the original Rani of Jhansi.
Yes,
please,
you're talking
please.
about the brigade that was
Rani of
formed
Jhansi
in
The
her
fought the
name.
original
war.
Rani of Jhansi fought like a cavalry soldier.
Okay.
I'm talking of the Rani of Jhansi brigade in the in the Azad Hind Fauj, which Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose raised, one of the most forward-thinking men of his generation. So that is a wrong impression you've got, that was then. No, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose is one of the most enlightened and forward-thinking. He was the person who raised this all-women's regiment. And that is, and you can't get more forward-thinking than that. He's the one who did it. So I don't think one should accuse him of being backward in his thinking.
No, I'm not saying at all. I'm saying, you know, things change with time. For that time to be compared to this may not be right. General Sehgal wanted to make a point, and then I will go to Captain Amrit Kaur.
Aishwarya, I totally agree with you when you talk about the futuristic war. But we've got to face the reality. Presently, we're not fighting, looking at the futuristic war. On a daily basis, we're fighting a war against the jihadis. And this war against the jihadis will continue. It's been continuing for the last 15 years and will continue for as long as you and I can think and debate about. Next 10 to 15 years, we will continue to be fighting the jihadis. There's going to be no futuristic war between India and Pakistan or between India and China. Because modern wars are not winnable. If you see, America lost to Vietnam in 1970s. America came into Iraq and managed to get out, saving its prestige. They've been in Afghanistan for 17 to 18 years and they want to pull out without much loss of face. Soviet Union came into Afghanistan and broke into pieces. And so Soviet Union broke up and the Central Asian republics and the Eastern European countries became separate. So present day environment, modern war is not winnable. And Pakistan knows it, India knows it, China knows it. We are not going to fight a war, we are going to fight the war of the variety that we're fighting. And under these circumstances, it will not be appropriate to expose our women to this sort of an enemy. However, over a period of time, as I said, let the issue evolve itself. Let the women first come into every role other than the combat role and see how they're performing, because in other roles also, they will be exposed off and on to, like for example, when they go into certain battalions, they will be doing patrolling duty, etc., along with the infantry or along with the others. And they will get an opportunity of exposing themselves. And once they get conditioned to this sort of an environment, it slowly and steadily can evolve into what you're wanting to do. But on day one, I think Supreme Court's judgment is very honorable, and the Indian Armed Forces will very gracefully and dignified manner accept that decision. That is high time that the women are given permanent commission and they're given command appointments other than in the fighting arms.
Okay. General Chaudhary wants to add to that. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I want to say something, that I am really appalled at this argument put up by the Ministry of Defense, that the soldiers will not obey the orders of a woman officer or a lady officer because they come from a rural area. What utter nonsense. An army is an army. When a senior officer or a superior officer gives an order, the soldier obeys it. We are the Indian Army, we obey orders, and this argument should never have been used that the men will be hesitant in taking orders from a woman officer. That is a totally misleading, misguiding description of the Indian Army.
Well, I completely take your point, and in fact, the last time we had this debate, when this, the government's affidavit was submitted, even General VP Malik was of the same view that he just couldn't fathom why anybody would give this argument. And Captain Kaur, in fact, I wanted to ask you on that, since you have been in the forces, did this argument, make sense to you at all? Did you ever, face a difficulty with people following your orders, because that just completely goes against the basic DNA of the army?
A complete no is what I would like to say. I didn't face what you just said, not even a percent of it. From the day I got commissioned, I went to my unit, till the day I left the army, not a single moment I faced where the men refused to follow my orders, or they tried to create any havoc or any kind of a problem to me in terms of, trying to show me as if I was a woman and not somebody of their or a man. So, why are we just forgetting the fact that women are capable of doing what they are given to do? Let's not forget, let's say we talk about CRPF. We have a lady called Usha Kiran, if I'm not wrong. She is the first woman to have fought guerrilla warfare. So what exactly is that? You're fighting the Naxalites. You're fighting in Chhattisgarh, in the area where, it is the worst ever situation. I understand that. I do respect what the generals are saying. I respect both their views, especially when they say that we do not want our women folks to get mutilated or suffer the same kind of brunt that our men are. You are actually denying 50% of our population to protect your country. As simple as that. Probably the women want to do that. Maybe they want to go ahead and be a part of the male contingent and be on the front line and protect the nation. That's the feeling we also have in our hearts. So why deny that? This argument is completely baseless when it comes to, the discussions that have been taking place for the past so many years, for that matter. I think this is completely baseless. At least give them a chance. Unless a chance is granted, unless that opportunity is granted, unless that battalion is created, and unless the women actually go out there and fight, you would not know what women are capable of. So I think, the argument of women not being able to do it, probably it is just in the mind right now. A complete change of mindset, is what is required at this moment in time.
I just want to highlight that there was an interview that General Rawat, who till recently was the army chief and now is the CDS, in an interview also made the same argument that women, while he is ready to introduce women in combat roles, the army may not be, as most Jawans come from villages and they may not accept a woman officer leading them. The other thing he said, and Captain Kaur, maybe you want to respond on that one. General Rawat said that, well, there is motherhood and child care. And how can I put somebody in a combat role or in a commanding role and then have them, vanish maybe for 6 months and 9 months?
Yes, I do remember that moment when General Rawat had said that the men may be peeping inside the tents of women officer. Probably it was out of concern. I respect sir's view for sure. But the fact of the matter is, I was a part of Operation Parakram. The moment I got commissioned into the army, I directly went to the field where Operation Parakram was on. For almost 6 to 7 odd months, we were living in tents in those areas amongst the men. And I was the only lady officer, in between 800 men. I didn't come across a single, moment where I felt that I was my dignity was being compromised in any ways. So I think this is something. Probably it is just a matter of imagination, or probably one odd case here and there might have occurred, which has been taken, which is being taken as as a wholesome view. Secondly, to your saying that. Whether or not maternity leave or taking on leave of 6 months, etc. See, the fact is, even the male officers take leave. They have compassionate ground postings. They have leave taken for various personal reasons. Why don't you count that too? I agree, maternity leave, and you see, a woman has to play a certain role in life. So this is another role that she's playing. Why can't the entire team of officers or the team of the army, why can't they support her that way? It is a physiological, requirement of a woman. So if you're granting her a 6 months of maternity leave, what kind of a difference is it really making? Because, one woman going on a maternity leave does not create the entire team of women fighting a war over there. It doesn't really create any difference to the entire team, you see. So
yes,
please
absolutely.
don't generalize the whole thing by saying because they are... yes. So terming us as a women and, just saying that because they are women, they can do it. This is where I think the parity is being, completely displayed.
Okay, Wing Commander Acharya wants to add to that. Go ahead, please.
I wanted to say that we are talking, today is a great day and I congratulate Tanvi. But do we bother to think about how many women officers percentage-wise there in the armed forces? Not even 10% to the entire population of male officers.
Yes.
Air Force perhaps is more with some 7, 8, 9% officers of the total strength. So I think when we will grow in numbers and there will be more women officers, we are not even asking for 50% of the strength, but little more than what is presently. Then perhaps this combat role thing will also be, the mindset will change and perhaps it will be given as an experiment basis. The other thing I want to add is, in my 24 years with the Air Force, I have realized that we connect better to the male folks than the male officers because we have a better emotional quotient with them. So this is my personal experience and I think nobody denies the orders. So these are the 2 points which I want to make.
Okay, I'm going to take that and I will also say thank you to all of our panelists. It was a great conversation and I'm truly blessed to have all of you on this panel bringing in different views. Thank you so much for joining us. Part 1 is done, viewers, and I will take on from what Wing Commander Anuma Acharya said, that perhaps as more women join the army, the Indian army, just like they are joining the Air Force and the Navy, as more women do that, their voice will have to be heard. Their views will have to be factored in. And I think now, by far, it's been proven multiple times, even the generals on our show agreed, that there is no doubt absolutely about the capabilities, about the bravery of women soldiers in any of the armed forces, in any of the wings, whether it's the Army or the Air Force or the Navy, or the contribution they're actually making to the safety and security of this country. If it is about having them in every single space where men are, let that decision be that of women. If the concern is their safety, let them decide. It can't be decided by anybody else except the woman soldier who wants to stand there and defend our country. Why should that right be taken away from her just because we want to protect her? We're out now. We're out in every field, every sphere, and we are fighting it in this world. We don't need anybody else to look out for us. We can do that job. We can look out for ourselves, for our families, and for our country. Thank you so much for joining us.